Commander Marcus Vale stood at the observation deck of the Earth Alliance flagship Sentinel, watching the refugee ships arrive from the Centauri worlds. Each vessel carried hundreds of survivors from the recent stellar catastrophe that had rendered their home systems uninhabitable. The ships were little more than converted cargo haulers, their hulls scarred from the desperate journey through contested space. 20 years of military service had taught Vale to trust his instincts, and something about this operation felt wrong. The Alliance's sudden generosity in accepting refugees from a historically hostile civilization raised too many questions. He adjusted his uniform's collar, the weight of his command insignia feeling heavier than usual. "Commander, your presence is requested in Medical Bay 7, the ship's AI announced. It was the third such request today. The official story was that all refugees needed to undergo standard quarantine protocols, but the focus on the children struck him as unusual. Vale made his way through the stark corridors, nodding to crew members who snapped to attention as he passed. The Sentinel had been his home for 5 years, but today its familiar passages felt somehow colder, more institutional. Medical Bay 7 was officially listed as a quarantine facility, but its security rivaled that of the ship's weapons systems. Vale pressed his palm to the scanner, and the reinforced doors slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, rows of stasis pods lined the walls, each containing a sleeping child. Commander Vale, Dr. Raina Winters greeted him without looking up from her terminal. "I trust you've reviewed the latest progress reports." Her voice carried the clipped tones of someone who viewed conversation as an inefficient use of time. "I have," Vale replied, moving to stand beside her. "What I haven't seen is any explanation for why these children are being separated from their parents." He studied the nearest pod, where a young boy floated in suspended animation, dark hair drifting like seaweed in an invisible current. Winters finally looked up, her cybernetic eye whirring as it focused on his face. "The separation is temporary. We need to ensure they're properly adapted to Earth's biosphere before integration can begin. Surely you understand the necessity of caution." Vale had read enough classified reports to recognize sanitized language when he heard it. "Show me the real data, Doctor. Not the version cleaned up for command briefings." A moment of tension stretched between them before Winters sighed and entered a series of commands into her terminal. "You have alpha-level clearance. I suppose you'd have seen this eventually." The holographic display filled with new information, genetic sequences, neural patterns, and modification protocols. Vale's jaw tightened as he read, his worst suspicions confirmed. "You're not treating them. You're changing them." "We're improving them," Winters corrected. "The Centauri children possess genetic markers that make them uniquely suitable for enhancement. Their neural plasticity is remarkable. With the right modifications, they could become humanity's greatest asset. They're refugees. Children who've lost everything. Not test subjects." Vale's voice remained steady, but his hands had curled into fists at his sides. "They're the future," Winters insisted. "The Alliance has spent decades trying to develop stable human augments. These children are the key to success. Their parents signed the medical waivers." Under duress, Vale cut her off. "Signing whatever was put in front of them in exchange for sanctuary." He turned to face her fully. "How many? Excuse me. How many children have you already processed? How many have died in your attempts to improve them?" Winters' organic eye narrowed. "You're overstepping, Commander. This project has full approval from Alliance Command. Your role is to maintain security, not question operational parameters." Vale looked back at the pods, at the innocent faces behind the glass. He thought of his own childhood, of the sister he'd lost to a different kind of experiment, of promises made to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. "You're right, Doctor," he said quietly. "I do understand necessity." In one fluid motion, he drew his sidearm and fired at the main terminal. Alarms blared as systems began to shut down. The necessity of doing what's right. Security breach in Medical Bay 7, the ship's AI announced as emergency protocols engaged. Vale knew he had minutes at most before response teams arrived. Have you lost your mind? Winters shouted over the alarms. This is treason. Vale was already moving, accessing the stasis pod controls. No, Doctor. This is conscience. He initiated the emergency release sequence. And I should have listened to mine sooner. The pods began their wake-up cycles as heavy boots thundered in the corridor outside. Vale positioned himself between the doors and the children, his weapon ready. He had no illusions about his chances against a full security team, but he only needed to buy enough time for the children to wake. As the first pod opened with a rush of cryogas, Vale made a silent promise to the kids stirring from their artificial sleep. He would either find a way to save them, or die trying. Some orders weren't meant to be followed, some lines weren't meant to be crossed, and some causes were worth any price. The security team was almost at the door. Vale checked his weapon's charge and allowed himself a grim smile. His career in the Alliance was over, but perhaps his real mission was just beginning. The maintenance tunnels of the Sentinel were never meant to accommodate a group of frightened children, but Vale had long ago memorized every forgotten passage and emergency route on his ship. He led them through the darkness, their bare feet padding silently on metal grating. Behind them, security alerts echoed through the main corridors. 3 levels down, he whispered to the oldest of the children, a girl with silver-streaked hair who called herself Zara. There's a secondary hangar bay they converted to storage. That's our way out. She nodded, helping to guide the younger ones forward. The genetic modifications had left their mark on all 12 children. Some had eyes that gleamed like cats in the dim light, others showed traces of bioluminescence beneath their skin. Vale tried not to think about what other changes might be lying dormant in their altered DNA. A sudden wave of dizziness swept through the group, bringing them to a halt. They're using neural suppressors, Vale realized. The Alliance wasn't taking any chances. He pulled a small device from his pocket and activated it, creating a localized dampening field. Stay close to me. Commander Vale. Admiral Lancaster's voice boomed through the ship's comm system. You're making a terrible mistake. These children are part of something greater than yourself. Return them to Medical Bay 7, and we can discuss your concerns through proper channels. Vale didn't bother responding. Lancaster had been his mentor once, but that relationship had died the moment Vale saw those stasis pods. He checked his datapad, tracking security team movements through the ship's network while he still had access. They reached a junction, and Vale held up his hand for silence. Heavy boots marched past on the deck above them. Once the sound faded, he led them forward again, but one of the younger boys stumbled, letting out a small cry. It hurts, the child whimpered, clutching his head. Vale knelt beside him, noting how the boy's skin had taken on a metallic sheen, another sign of the improvements they'd forced upon him. I know, Kai, Vale whispered. But we have to keep moving. Can you be brave for me? The boy nodded, and Vale lifted him onto his back. They pressed on. The storage bay was exactly where Vale remembered, but they weren't alone. A figure waited in the shadows, and Vale raised his weapon before recognizing her. You're late, said Dr. Naira Voss, her silver eyes reflecting the emergency lighting. The Centaurian scientist had contacted him 3 days ago, warning him about the true nature of the refugee program. She'd been the one to show him the classified files that proved the children were being used as test subjects. We had complications, Vale replied, lowering his weapon. Did you secure transport? Naira gestured to a sleek shuttle partially hidden behind cargo containers. The Star Weaver is ready. But we have another problem. She held up her datapad, showing security feeds. They've locked down all departure vectors. Even with my override codes, we'll be shot down before we clear the defense grid. Vale studied the tactical display, his mind racing. Unless we give them a bigger problem to deal with. He turned to Zara. Get everyone aboard. Dr. Voss will help you strap in. To Naira, he added, how much do you know about the Sentinel's antimatter containment systems? Her eyes widened. Enough to know that tampering with them would be suicide. Not tampering, Vale corrected, already accessing the ship's engineering subsystems through his command codes. Just convincing them we are. Understanding dawned on Naira's face. A false containment breach. They'll have to divert power from weapons to emergency shields. Giving us a window to escape. Vale's fingers flew over the console. But my codes will only work for a few more minutes before they lock me out completely. Naira hesitated. If we do this, there's no going back. The Alliance will hunt us across every system. They'll hunt us anyway. Vale looked at the children being helped aboard the shuttle. At least this way, we'll have a fighting chance. The decision made, they worked quickly. Vale created a cascade of false readings in the antimatter containment grid while Naira programmed their escape trajectory. Security teams would be converging on engineering, leaving their route relatively clear. Alert, antimatter containment failing in sections 15 through 22, the ship's AI announced. All personnel proceed to emergency stations. This is not a drill. Vale allowed himself a grim smile as klaxons blared and emergency protocols engaged. He could almost picture Lancaster's face as the Admiral was forced to choose between capturing them and saving his ship. Time to go, Naira called from the shuttle's hatch. The diversion won't fool them for long. Vale took one last look at the ship that had been his home. Goodbye, old friend, he whispered, then sprinted for the shuttle. The hatch sealed behind him as Naira brought the engines online. In the passenger compartment, 12 pairs of eyes watched him with a mixture of fear and hope. These children had already lost one home to forces beyond their control. Vale silently vowed they wouldn't lose another. Breaking free in 3, Naira announced from the pilot's seat. 2. 1. The shuttle shot from the bay like a bullet from a gun, accelerating hard enough to press them all back into their seats. Behind them, the Sentinel's weapons remained silent, its energy diverted to protecting against a containment breach that didn't exist. They're scrambling fighters, Naira reported, her hands dancing over the controls. We have maybe 2 minutes before they realize the breach is fake. That's all we need. Vale strapped himself into the co-pilot's seat. Plot a course for the outer rim. We've got friends there. People who help others disappear. As they pushed the shuttle to its limits, outrunning the growing chaos behind them, Vale felt a small hand on his shoulder. It was Zara, her modified eyes glowing with an inner light. What happens now? She asked softly. Vale covered her hand with his own. Now we find out who we really are. All of us, together. The stars stretched into lines of light as they made the jump to hyperspace, leaving behind the only world Vale had ever known. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the chance to right a terrible wrong. It wasn't the life he'd planned, but looking at the children they'd saved, he knew it was the life he was meant to find. The abandoned mining facility on Helios 9 wasn't much, but after 3 weeks of constant movement, it felt like a fortress. Vale watched through reinforced windows as Zara and Kai practiced controlling their emerging abilities in the facility's main chamber. Silvery threads of energy danced between their fingertips as they learned to harness the changes forced upon them. Their neural patterns are stabilizing, Naira said, studying readings on her portable scanner. The genetic modifications are integrating more naturally than I expected. She paused, frowning at a new data stream. But there's something else happening. Something I've never seen before. Vale moved to look over her shoulder. Dangerous? Unknown. The children are developing abilities that weren't part of the original programming. They're evolving beyond the Alliance's designs. She gestured to where Kai had created a sphere of pure energy, holding it steady while the younger children watched in amazement. That shouldn't be possible. Before Vale could respond, proximity alerts blared through the facility. He rushed to the security console, checking the perimeter sensors. 3 ships entering orbit. Alliance signatures. They found us. Naira was already moving, gathering essential equipment. We need to evacuate. No. Vale studied the tactical display. Those aren't military vessels. Wrong configuration. He enhanced the image, and his breath caught. It's the Huntress. Your former student. Commander Lyra Thorne. Vale's expression darkened. She commands a special operations unit now. If she's here instead of regular Alliance forces. They're desperate, Naira finished. Which means the children are more valuable than even we suspected. A new alert flashed on the console. They're deploying drop ships. Lyra's not waiting for an invitation. Vale activated the facility's internal comm, everyone to shelter positions. This is not a drill. The children immediately began moving to their designated safe rooms, a routine they'd practiced daily. He turned to Naira. Get them to the backup transport. I'll hold them off. Marcus. Naira caught his arm. There are other ways. Let me try to contact my people. The Centaurian Science Council would protect us. Your people are still recovering from their own disaster. They can't risk open conflict with the Alliance. He checked his weapon. Besides, we both know the Council has hardliners who'd want to study the children just as much as the Alliance does. The first explosions rocked the facility's outer defenses. Vale moved to a defensive position, but Zara and 3 other older children hadn't retreated with the others. We can fight, Zara insisted, energy crackling around her hands. You've seen what we can do. No. Vale's voice was firm. You're not weapons. You're children. And I won't let you be used as either. But we're stronger together, Kai added, stepping forward. The dreams told us. Vale and Naira exchanged glances. What dreams? She asked carefully. We see things when we sleep, Zara explained. Places that were and places that will be. We're connected now, all of us. And we see you there too, both of you. Family. Another explosion, closer this time. Vale's tactical training screamed at him to get them to safety, but something in Zara's words resonated with observations he'd been making. The children weren't just developing powers, they were developing a collective consciousness, supporting and strengthening each other. Commander Vale. Lyra's voice cut through the facility's comm system. By now you've realized you're surrounded. Surrender the subjects, and I'll guarantee your safety. Resist, and I'll be forced to use extreme measures. Vale remembered teaching Lyra at the academy, watching her grow from an idealistic cadet into one of the Alliance's most effective operators. She'd been like a daughter to him once. Now she was the weapon pointed at his new family. You know me better than that, Lyra, he responded. These children aren't subjects. They're survivors. And I won't let them be caged again. They're the next step in human evolution, Lyra countered. The key to our species' survival. Don't force me to choose between my respect for you and my duty to humanity's future. Humanity's future shouldn't be built on the suffering of children. Vale nodded to Zara and the others. Show me. The children joined hands, forming a circle. Energy pulsed between them, growing stronger with each heartbeat. Naira's scanner beeped frantically as it tried to process the readings. Marcus, she whispered, their power levels are exceeding anything in the Alliance data. They're tapping into something far beyond genetic engineering. Vale watched in awe as the energy field expanded, encompassing them all. He felt a connection forming, not just between the children but with himself and Naira as well. In that moment of shared consciousness, he understood what the children had been trying to tell them. They weren't just random test subjects. Something greater had been guiding events, using the Alliance's own hubris to bring them together. The genetic modifications had only awakened what was already there, waiting. The facility's walls groaned as Lyra's forces began their assault, but Vale felt no fear. The children's power flowed through him, showing him possibilities he'd never imagined. They weren't meant to run forever. They were meant to stand together, to become something new. "Last chance, Commander," Lyra called out as breach charges detonated against the main doors. Vale looked at his newfound family, the determined faces of the children, Nyra's expression of wonder as she finally understood what her instruments had been trying to tell her. He thought of the choices that had brought them here, of the price of conscience and the reward of truth. "You're right, Lyra," he responded, watching the doors begin to buckle. "This is humanity's future. But not the way the Alliance imagines it." The doors exploded inward as Lyra's strike team breached the facility. But they weren't prepared for what they found inside. None of them were prepared for what came next. The strike team's weapons turned to dust in their hands. Metal crumbled like dried leaves, advanced technology rendered useless by forces beyond their understanding. Commander Lyra Thorne stood at the threshold, watching her carefully laid plans dissolve in the face of something she hadn't been prepared to confront. The children floated several inches off the ground, connected by threads of luminescent energy. Their eyes glowed with an inner light that spoke of power both ancient and new. At their center, Zara raised her hand, and the very air seemed to bend around them. "Stand down, Lyra," Vale said softly. "Before someone gets hurt." "What have you done to them?" Lyra's hand instinctively reached for a sidearm that was no longer there. Her tactical visor's readings were going haywire, unable to process what it was seeing. "We didn't do anything," Nyra stepped forward. "We just stopped others from turning them into weapons. They're becoming what they were always meant to be." A sudden pulse of energy rippled through the facility, and images filled everyone's minds. They saw the truth, not just about the children, but about the force that had drawn them together. The Centauri catastrophe hadn't been an accident. It had been a catalyst, designed to bring specific genetic markers into alignment. "The Alliance didn't create us," Kai's voice echoed strangely, carrying the weight of collective consciousness. "They only woke us up. We are the bridge between what humanity is and what it could become." Lyra's strike team shifted uneasily, their training useless against the reality before them. Some lowered their weapons, while others backed away, overwhelmed by the psychic resonance filling the room. "The Alliance Council said you were the key to human advancement," Lyra's voice wavered. "They said we needed to control and direct your development. And that's why they'll never understand." Vale moved to stand beside the children. "You can't control evolution. You can only choose whether to fight it or embrace it." Another wave of images washed over them. The children showed them glimpses of possible futures, worlds where humanity had learned to transcend its limitations, and worlds where fear had led to extinction. They saw the crossroads they stood at, the weight of choice heavy in the air. "There are others like us," Zara revealed. "All across known space. Children of both human and Centaurian descent, carrying the seeds of change. The Alliance's program didn't create us, it helped us find each other." Lyra looked at her former mentor, seeing not a traitor but a man who had recognized truth when it presented itself. "If what they're showing us is real, the Council needs to know. The whole Alliance needs to know." "They're not ready," Nyra cautioned. "Look how they responded to the first hints of evolutionary advancement. They tried to control it, weaponize it. Humanity needs time to prepare for this knowledge." Vale watched his former student wrestling with her duty and her conscience. "You have a choice to make, Lyra. The same one I made. What matters more, following orders, or following truth?" The facility's systems sparked and flickered as the children's power continued to grow. Outside, the Alliance ships in orbit reported massive energy readings they couldn't explain. The moment of decision had arrived. Lyra squared her shoulders, years of training warring with the undeniable reality before her. Then she did something that surprised everyone, she smiled. You taught me more than tactics, Commander, she said to Vale. You taught me to recognize when the rulebook needs to be thrown away. She turned to her team. Stand down. Full stand down. Commander, one of her officers questioned. The Council's orders. The Council isn't here, Lyra cut him off. I am. And I'm ordering you to stand down. The tension in the room shifted. The children's energy field pulsed once more, then gently receded. They returned to the ground, though their eyes still held traces of otherworldly light. You understand this isn't over, Vale said to his former student. The Alliance won't stop looking. No, Lyra agreed. But maybe they don't have to find what they expect to find. She holstered her remaining weapons. My team is good at making evidence disappear. At creating plausible explanations for missing resources and failed operations. Naira's scanner beeped, drawing their attention. The children's power signatures are stabilizing, but they're not diminishing. Whatever they've awakened, it's permanent. We need time, Zara said, speaking now as herself rather than the collective. Time to understand what we're becoming. Time to learn how to help others like us when they start to wake up. Vale looked at the assembled group, the children with their newfound power, Naira with her unwavering dedication to truth, and Lyra, choosing conscience over duty. They were an unlikely family, brought together by forces beyond their understanding. Then we'll make that time, he decided. Together. Over the next hours, plans were made. Lyra's team would report a catastrophic containment failure at the facility, evidence destroyed, no survivors. The children and their guardians would vanish into the shadows of space, seeking others like them, building a network of safety and understanding. As they prepared to leave, Lyra pulled her former mentor aside. I'll do what I can from inside the Alliance. Create blind spots in the search, redirect resources. But sooner or later, they'll figure out something's happening. The change is coming, whether they're ready or not. Vale clasped her shoulder, proud of the woman she'd become. When that day comes, we'll need people like you. People who can help bridge the gap between what is and what could be. Their eyes met in understanding. They were no longer commander and student, hunter and prey. They were partners in a greater purpose, protecting the first ripples of a wave that would eventually transform humanity. Legacy of Hope. 6 months had transformed the abandoned Deep Space Research Station into something extraordinary. Vale walked through corridors that hummed with more than just machinery, they resonated with the combined energy of 37 awakened children. Since their confrontation with Lyra, their numbers had more than tripled as others found their way to this sanctuary among the stars. The observation deck had become his favorite place to think. Through its vast windows, he could see the nebula that helped mask their location, its swirling colors a constant reminder of the universe's capacity for change and beauty. They're ready, Naira's voice came from behind him. She'd been working tirelessly, documenting the children's evolution, trying to understand the bridge between science and the seemingly miraculous. Vale turned to find her accompanied by Zara, now carrying herself with the quiet confidence of a leader. Other children had gathered behind them, some human, some Centaurian, all bearing the distinctive glow of their awakened potential. Show him, Zara said softly. The children joined hands, and the station's lights dimmed as they channeled their energy. But this time was different. Instead of raw power, they created images of crystalline clarity, projecting them into the space before Vale. He saw spread across the galaxy, points of light representing others like them, waiting to be found. Some were in Alliance space, others in Centaurian territories, and still more in the unclaimed regions between. Each light pulsed with potential, waiting to be awakened. There are thousands, Naira breathed, her scanner forgotten in her hand. The genetic markers, the potential for this evolution, it's been building for generations. Not just potential anymore, Kai stepped forward. He was taller now, his once fearful expression replaced by purpose. We can feel them starting to wake up on their own. The changes that were forced on us are occurring naturally now. Evolution is accelerating. Vale studied the galactic map of lights. The Alliance won't be able to ignore this forever. Even with Lyra's help, we can't hide everyone. We don't have to, Zara replied. Not anymore. She waved her hand, and the image shifted, showing possible futures branching like rivers. We've learned so much in these months. About what we are, what we can become. And most importantly, what we should not become. The images shifted again, showing scenes of conflict and harmony, of fear and acceptance. Humanity stands at a crossroads, one of the older children, Ren, explained. The Alliance fears change they can't control. But change is coming whether they fear it or not. Our role isn't to hide anymore, it's to help both humans and Centaurians understand that evolution doesn't mean the end of who they are. It means the beginning of who they could be. Vale felt a familiar presence and turned to find Lyra stepping out of the shadows. She visited when she could, bringing information and resources, her own conviction growing stronger with each encounter. The Council is starting to ask questions they can't ignore, she reported. Too many incidents of spontaneous awakening. Too many children showing abilities they can't explain. They're realizing it's bigger than their experiments ever were. Then it's time, Naira said, looking to Vale. We've learned all we can in hiding. The next step requires courage of a different kind. Vale looked at their unlikely family, children of two species carrying the future in their genes, a brilliant scientist who'd chosen truth over tradition, a former student who'd found her own path to justice, and himself, a soldier who'd discovered that the greatest battles were won not with weapons but with conscience. We'll need to be careful, he cautioned. Strategic in how we reveal ourselves. One step at a time, finding allies, building understanding. We've already begun, Zara smiled. She gestured, and new images appeared, sympathetic Alliance officials, open-minded Centaurian scientists, influential figures who'd glimpsed the truth and chosen hope over fear. The network grows every day. Not everyone fears the future. The station hummed with energy as the children joined their consciousness once more, but this time they invited the adults to fully share their vision. Vale, Naira, and Lyra found themselves immersed in a possibility they'd only glimpsed before, a future where humanity's next step didn't erase its past but built upon it, where evolution meant not just physical change but spiritual and social growth as well. This is what we've been working toward, Naira realized. Not just protecting the children, but preparing for this moment. When we could help both our peoples see that the boundaries between us were always artificial. The Alliance taught us that power must be controlled, Lyra added. But they never understood that the greatest power comes from letting go, of fear, of the need to dominate, of the illusion of control. Vale watched the children, their children, as they maintained the vast psychic network that connected awakened souls across the galaxy. They were no longer refugees or experiments. They were pioneers, guides to a future that was racing to meet them. Then let's begin, he said finally. Not with a revolution or a battle, but with a choice. The same choice that brought us all here, to trust in something greater than our fears. The nebula's light painted the observation deck in shifting colors as they made their plans. Soon, they would reach out to others, both awakened and conventional, building bridges of understanding between what was and what could be. The children would be both example and inspiration, showing that evolution wasn't something to be feared or controlled, but embraced and guided with wisdom and compassion. As Vale looked at his gathered family, he remembered the moment he'd first chosen to defy his orders, to trust his conscience over his command. That choice had led him here, to a future he could never have imagined but now couldn't imagine living without. The next chapter would bring new challenges, new choices, new opportunities for both triumph and failure. But they would face them together, bound not by genetics or species or duty, but by something far stronger, the shared dream of what they could become. In the eternal dance of stars beyond the station's windows, Vale saw the reflection of infinite possibility. They were no longer running from the past or hiding from the present. They were walking boldly toward a future that they would help shape, one awakened soul at a time. The legacy they would leave wasn't one of power or control, but of hope, hope that when change comes, as it always must, we can choose to face it with courage, wisdom, and love. That was a legacy worth any price, any sacrifice, any leap of faith. And in the end, that was the greatest evolution of all.